Hey everybody, welcome back to an all-new episode of 10 to Life with me, Annie Elise. Now, you may have noticed that lately we've been doing some extra videos outside of just like the normal release schedule because not only have we wanted to give you these updates, but there's been a lot of cases that we've covered in the past where we've done a deep dive and then updates have come out, but it hasn't been enough information to really warrant a full sit-down deep dive video. But a lot of these cases now have had enough updates that it feels like, no, we should circle back. We should talk about this. And we've been posting a few of them, as you've probably seen, and they're very well received. And I've gotten a lot of feedback from you guys that you appreciate that we're doing that. So I wanted to keep with it. And I also wanted to do it because I feel like it's a good way to update you on these cases. We're now in our official anniversary month of YouTube. It's been 4 years. And I just felt like, let's do something not to celebrate the anniversary, but like to give you guys the content that really started the channel, which was off the cuff, quick videos, giving you case updates. And so I'm really trying to kind of get back to like, I don't think the right word and term is grassroots. I think I said that in the last video too, but like the origin story of this channel, if that makes sense. Just jumping on the mic, giving you all the news, breaking down these cases together. So for these updates, I'm going to, instead of just like have it half like piecemeal, I was going to say half-ass, but I have it piecemeal. I'm going to do like the full comprehensive overview of the case with the updates so that it's all in one place. So whether you're familiar with it, you need a refresher on the case, whether you're brand new to it, that way it's like all of the current up-to-date information is in one singular spot. And the case we're talking about today is one that I covered quite a while ago. Was it a year ago? I don't know. It was a while ago, long enough that it's one of the more complex cases I think I've ever talked about on my podcast, on my channel, anywhere. It's the Adelson case. This is like the family from hell, like the in-laws from hell, because it's like this murder for hire plot. The brother-in-law's involved, the mother-in-law's involved. We think that the wife is probably involved and going to be arrested soon. There's a body cam footage of these arrests that went absolutely ultra viral. I'm talking like over 25 million views that when we posted it. It was unbelievable. And the reason why people are so fascinated with this case is because it's like, it truly is just unbelievable. How do people like this exist? The plotting, the scheming, the family, the interconnected twine of just like deceit and distrust. So we're going through all of it today, but I want to warn you, buckle up. It is going to be a wild, wild ride as we untangle everything about the Adelson family. Guys, let's jump right in. In July of 2014, in Tallahassee, Florida, a renowned criminal law professor named Dan Markel, who was also a respected figure at Florida State University, was murdered, shot in the head, and this all happened at his own home in his garage. A neighbor had heard loud bangs, then called the police, and they quickly responded to Dan's home.
Okay, tell me exactly what happened.
We heard and looked in, the garage door was up. And I thought the gentleman was backing out, and I went back to my house, but he never backed out. And I came back over, and his driver's side window is shattered, and he's battered and can't answer. He's inside. I don't know if somebody tried to shoot him or if he shot himself or what. I don't know. He didn't send an ambulance in a hurry. An EMT. He's still alive. He's moving.
Okay, what's going on with him?
I don't know. The driver's side window is all bashed in, and he's got blood all over his head. He's not responding to me. I think you need to hurry.
Police found Dan critically injured, but there wasn't any sign of robbery or even a break-in, so Dan was rushed to the hospital. But unfortunately, later, he died from his injuries. Now, police believed that this was a targeted homicide. But the question was who, and more importantly, why? Now let's talk for a minute about who Dan Markel was. That way we could figure out who would want to do this to him. Originally from Canada, Dan Markel was a Harvard Law School graduate. He was a brilliant legal mind, a respected law professor at FSU, and he was a devoted father to 2 young boys with a beautiful wife named Wendy Adelson. After graduating from Harvard, Dan had moved to D.C., where Wendy, his now wife, was also working at the time. Wendy was working in D.C. with an internship while attending University of Miami Law School. The two of them met on a dating app called JDate, which is actually a very popular dating app that is aimed at Jewish singles. Both Dan and Wendy were Jewish. However, for Dan, religion was extremely important to him, and he embraced more of the day-to-day traditional Jewish values, more so than Wendy did, and he had even spent a year in Israel at one point. So one day, while Wendy was online browsing JDate for potential suitors, she came across Dan's profile. Now, what's different a little bit in Wendy's case is as she was looking online at this website, her mom was looking with her, which I guess isn't that uncommon. I've just never really heard of it before, but I guess they were doing it together, and I suppose that makes sense for a mother and daughter. I don't know. I guess you want your mom to weigh in. It just seems a little personal for me. But anyways, so she's like perusing through JDate, and she comes across Dan's profile, and her mom really encouraged her to make a connection with him based off of what his profile had to say, that he was this strong Jewish man, had these great values, so she decided to proceed with it. So Wendy and Dan hit it off. They dated, and then they eventually got married, with both sides of the family contributing to the wedding. Now, while both sides of the families contributed to the finances in the wedding, Wendy's family paid for all of the catering in the family, which normally wouldn't strike you as anything specific, but here's where things got interesting with that. During the wedding, Dan had found that all of the food that was being served was not kosher. And if you remember, all of his traditional Jewish values are very important to him. So now, seeing his new wife's family, who volunteered to pay for all of the catering, had done so but hadn't kept kosher for any of it, really upset him. It really bothered him. But little did he know that this one move would truly set the table for he and Wendy's entire marriage, including his relationship with his now in-laws. After they got married, Dan received a job offer from FSU, so the two of them built a life together in Tallahassee, Florida. However, in 2012, after 7 years of marriage, Wendy had filed for divorce. Now, according to court documents, Dan returned home from a business trip, and he found his family completely gone. A majority of the furniture in the house was missing, and the divorce papers that Wendy had signed were just left laying on the bed. A complete abrupt move-out, divorce. It apparently shocked Dan completely. And not only was the divorce itself and the announcement of it abrupt, but after his split with Wendy, who was also now a lawyer and a professor at FSU as well, their divorce was anything but amicable, including a very nasty custody battle over their 2 children long after their divorce was finalized in the summer of 2013, which happened to be 1 year before Dan's death. Now, even though the two of them were divorced, Wendy was still Dan's next of kin. So the day that he died, police went to go and find her, to notify her and alert her what had happened. And they did locate her because she happened to be at lunch with some of her friends. So they immediately notified her and then brought her in to be interviewed.
There was a shooting at your home, or your ex-husband's home, at 2116 Trescott, okay? Your ex-husband, Daniel, all right, has been taken to the hospital. He's not going to survive.
Oh my God.
Okay?
I don't understand. I'm so I'm about to tremendous party. What happened?
Well, before we get into everything, I have to establish where you were and who you were with and so forth.
Okay.
Okay? And then once we've established all that, I can give you more details.
Okay.
Do you understand why I wanted you to come here before I discuss this?
Oh my God.
Now, during this interview, Wendy appeared to be absolutely devastated, and she gave the impression like despite the fact that she and Dan had their differences in court, he was still her boy's father, and this was completely devastating to her, and she was heartbroken. Wendy's interview was also over 5 hours long, and it didn't take her long to say that she had absolutely nothing to do with this, and also for her to give some ideas to the police of who could have done this. She even suggested that someone might have targeted Dan for her, on her behalf, but without her knowledge. And then she said that it might have been a man named Jeff Lacoste, who was also another professor at FSU. Apparently, Wendy and Jeff had previously dated, but they were now broken up. So Wendy casually mentions this to police, saying, okay, it might have been Jeff. We dated. He knew about the issues that Dan and I were having. Then she casually mentioned that her brother Charlie also knew the intricate details of their tumultuous divorce, saying that at one point her brother Charlie even bought her a TV as a divorce present, making a joke and saying, I was going to hire a hitman, but a TV was less expensive.
Do you know anybody that would have a beef against your ex-husband?
Who would do this?
I don't know. That's why you're here.
He didn't like Danny because Danny hurt me. I see why he's a good suspect. It's like, what if it's Jeff? Like, then I did this by asking for some time away from him. I made him crazy. My parents had more reason to dislike Danny than almost anyone else. He hurt their daughter. They're very angry with him.
But even my family, who felt like I had been mistreated, would never do something like this. Never.
Danny has been shot. Well, my parents sounded really surprised, so it's at least a relief. I was trying to think of who would be angry enough to do something to him. My parents would be angry, but they're not capable of this. Thank God. I really couldn't handle that right now.
Now, in that interview, after speaking to her parents, Wendy said that she was relieved that her parents were surprised because that meant that she knew that they weren't in on it, which is a really weird thing to say, right? Because why would she even think that that would be a possibility in the first place, that her parents were in on the murder of her ex-husband and father of her children? Well, it turned out that Wendy did have a reason to believe that her family hated Dan, and we're going to get to that in just a bit. But also, just as a side note here, when police had searched Wendy's phone, she had pretty alarming and interesting Google searches. She had Google searches of Dan's new girlfriend, the girlfriend's ex-husband, as well as searches for student-teacher pornography. Now, we're going to get into all of that in a second, but for now, in the immediate aftermath of Dan's murder, the police told the public that they believed that this was a targeted murder, but they didn't know who was responsible. Anyone in Dan's neighborhood that was there at the time that he was killed was urged to come forward if they had any information. The neighbor that called 911 had mentioned that he believed that he saw a light gold-colored vehicle that he believed might have been a Prius speeding away just after he heard those loud bangs. So at the time, that was really all the police had to go off of. Initially, based on the crime scene, police thought that Dan knew his killer. But this ultimately changed when police learned that Dan was actually on the phone with someone at the time of his death. And this person that Dan was on the phone with said that Dan said that a car was approaching him, a car that he didn't recognize. And then shortly after that, they heard the shots, and then they didn't hear Dan again. You see, Dan could be pretty argumentative and had very hot takes on controversial opinions that he put on his online blog. Some of Dan's colleagues had speculated that he had received threatening posts in the past. In one instance, an anonymous person wrote, "Bullies like this need to be made radioactive. Their arrogance and imperiousness speaks for itself. All means necessary must be employed." Police were never able to identify who that post came from, but would someone actually come over and kill him over that? Nobody really knew. Despite an extensive police investigation, no suspect was arrested or even named. And 8 months after Dan's murder, his parents were starting to get frustrated, and they began to worry that this was going to become a cold case. In an interview with the Daily Mail, his dad, Philip Markel, said, "We want to see the killer caught and brought to justice. It is frustrating as we are at a standstill, and that means we cannot have closure and just have to live with it. That is not the best situation. I have my own theory about who killed Dan, but I do not have the proof, and I am unwilling to share them." After Dan's death, Wendy ended up moving from Tallahassee to be closer with her family in South Florida, where she grew up. She also accepted a position working for a federal judge, and then later she moved to an upscale apartment in Miami with her 2 children. She also had their last names legally changed from Markel to Adelson. While working for the federal judge, Wendy took a creative writing class that had a podcast where she spoke about her divorce experience.
Thought I could cheat the system and marry a man I lacked passionate love for. Our marriage dissolved after the children arrived, as the loneliness of being married to someone that didn't view me as an equal crept in.
Now let's get into a little bit more of background on Wendy and why her family had their reasons for hating Dan apparently. Let's start with Wendy being the youngest child to her parents, Donna and Harvey Adelson. But it seems like Wendy and Charlie had always been a little bit closer siblings from the get-go. They attended high school at the same time, they were closer in age, just things like that. They always were a little bit closer than she and Robert. Now, their oldest son, Robert, became a doctor, and then Charlie went into the family dental practice as a periodontist, doing surgical implants, things like that, and Wendy decided to go to law school. So not bad, 2 doctors and a lawyer in your family. I would say you pretty much hit the jackpot there. So growing up, the family was all pretty close, this happy cookie-cutter life, right? Well, after Wendy had filed that ambush-style divorce and moved out while Dan was out of town on that business trip, she tried to move to be back closer to family in that Coral Springs area, which was about an 8 to 9 hour drive from where she and Dan lived with their kids. Well, Dan was apparently livid by this, and rightfully so. He didn't want her to take the children that far away from him, so he filed a motion against her in court. However, Wendy and her family were determined to move her and her boys to South Florida, where the rest of the Adelson family lived. But Dan refused this and successfully fought it in court. The judge ruled that Wendy could not move that far away from Dan, period. And this really pissed off Wendy's mother, Donna, the matriarch of the family. And when I say that, Donna really had taken on this role of the cliche, overbearing matriarch who called the shots for all of her adult children, not just Wendy. In fact, it's been speculated that the reason her oldest son, Robert, is estranged from the family is because his mom, Donna, didn't approve of his wife. Just truly overbearing, wants to have a hand in everything that her kids are doing, even though they're adults. Then when they do something that she doesn't agree with, that doesn't align with what she wants, she banishes them, pushes them away, or gets really angry. And that's what was happening now. Dan won in court. Wendy wasn't able to move back home to be closer to her family with her kids, so now Donna was coming off the rails. But surely that wouldn't be enough to commit murder, would it? So who was responsible for this? That's not motive enough. So then more time passed, and a year after Dan's murder, nobody was arrested. Then the 2-year mark happened. Still, nobody had been arrested, and people were now beginning to think that this was going to end up being a cold case, an unsolved case. And people were worried that this huge mystery of who murdered Dan would just never be solved. However, in the background, investigators were still looking into Dan's murder, and they finally caught a lead in May of 2016, right around the 2-year mark after Dan's murder.
They had surveillance video of it from city buses that it had driven by, intersection cameras were able to capture it.
This is a picture of the actual suspect vehicle. There are 4 things about this car that we're asking our viewers to look at. The first thing is going to be the color.
Silver pine mica.
Silver pine mica.
It means it's going to be sometimes silver, sometimes green, depending on the light.
How many silver pine mica Priuses are there around Tallahassee?
I guess there's probably a lot everywhere, but this one was pretty unique because it had a black passenger side mirror.
On the driver's side, it's the same color as the car. On this side, it's black. They're supposed to be the same color as the vehicle.
It was missing a tow cap.
If you look down here in the corner, there is a hole where you would put a tow vehicle into it. A toll card reader, it appears, in the front windshield.
Apparently, at that time in Tallahassee, there weren't any toll roads, and most people didn't have easy passes displayed in their windshields. So this led them to believe that the car was most likely from Central or Southern Florida. Tallahassee police dug deep into their investigation because they needed to now find this car. And eventually, they did. They tracked the car all the way to Miami, to a very small car rental shop. And from there, police were able to identify who had rented that Prius back in July of 2014. It was 2 men, Luis Riviera and Sigfrido Garcia. Luis and Sigfrido had grown up together and knew each other for a very long time. Now, since police now had names, they were able to go through phone records. And it turned out that back in July of 2014, their phone locations did not do them any sort of favors whatsoever. On July 16th of 2014, police said that the suspects, Luis and Sigfredo, traveled to Tallahassee from North Miami, this based on cell phone records, surveillance footage, and car rental information. The following day, on July 17th, Sigfredo and Luis arrived in Tallahassee just after midnight, this again according to cell phone records. Records also pinged their phones near Dan's house. Now initially there was a witness who turned out to be a self-confessed drug dealer who told police that he actually sold cocaine to Sigfredo and rented a hotel room in his own name for Sigfredo and Luis. Then, the following day, around 11 a.m. on July 18th, Dan Markell was shot in the head. After the shooting, ATM video surveillance captured both men in the Prius, further establishing that these two guys were who the police needed to look at. So now that they had their two guys, police were stuck with the job of figuring out how the hell these two guys were involved with Dan. Why would they want to murder Dan? Why would they be involved in this horrific homicide at Dan's own house, shooting him in the head? So they started looking back at the people that they initially interviewed. And one of those people was Wendy, Dan's ex-wife. And she had mentioned that she didn't know if somebody would have set something up to kill Dan on her behalf, if you remember. And she even had mentioned her ex-boyfriend Jeff. Now remember, Jeff and Wendy had dated for about 9 months until just before Dan was murdered. In Jeff's interview, he said, "I'm the paranoid ex-boyfriend. I was surprised that you guys didn't call me earlier though, because I probably said 100 times that I'd like to kick his ass because he kept really making Wendy suffer." He also mentioned a few other things in his interview. And Jeff backed up Wendy's story earlier about her brother Charlie, except in his interview, Jeff didn't think that it was a joke.
She told me that Charlie had looked into having Danny killed in the summer of 2013. She meant it dead serious. Not like I joke around, I like to kill Dan Markell, that's different. She said it in a dead serious, chilling, uncomfortable kind of way. In a moment I was like, my stomach flipped. I was like, whoa.
On May 25th, 2016, Sigfredo was arrested on charges of first-degree murder and possession of cocaine. The next day, Tallahassee PD held a press conference where they also named Luis as a suspect. But there weren't any other details given other than that because the documents were sealed. Then, on June 2nd, the documents were unsealed. And what came from that unsealing was a huge shock to the community. In what came as an extremely shocking twist to the public, who didn't know what was going on behind the scenes, police had established a connection between the Adelson family and Sigfredo, along with a detailed timeline and phone records linking what they had found. Now, I cannot stress enough just how damning some of this evidence was at this point. Investigators had spent a very long time making these connections and had sifted through an enormous amount of phone records, emails, and had even called in the FBI to make some wiretaps. On June 17th, both Sigfredo and Luis were indicted on murder charges, meaning the state wasn't going to have a preliminary hearing of any sort, and both of the men pled not guilty. Then, in a very shocking twist, another one, police made another arrest. The third arrest was the arrest of a woman who investigators said had ties to both the Adelson family and ties to the shooters. This woman was Catherine Manbagua, who was 31 at the time and also goes by Katie. In documents released by the police, detectives alleged that Katie had a romantic relationship with Charlie Adelson, Wendy's brother. And not only that, but she actually lived with Sigfredo and had 2 children with him. According to court documents, in the weeks leading up to Dan's murder and for a long time after, there were hundreds of calls between Charlie and Katie and between Katie and Sigfredo, and some of them were literally right after the other, like some sort of criminal phone tree. You call one person, they call the next, and you go all the way ping-ponging down the line. However, with all of this, Charlie was not charged. As the 3 of their trials approached, Luis accepted a plea deal from prosecutors where he actually ended up flipping on Katie and Sigfredo, and this was in a wild confession that was actually videotaped. So at this point, Luis was really spilling the beans on everybody involved, including the Adelsons, who up until this point had denied any involvement of any kind. Yet he claimed that Katie, who was in a relationship with Wendy's brother Charlie, put the two of them up to this murder-for-hire plot. Part of Luis's confession was accepting a guilty plea to second-degree murder, and he was sentenced to a 7-year prison term in exchange for his cooperation with prosecutors. Sigfredo's attorney spoke out in an interview and said, "These are dentists. They aren't the Sopranos, okay? The prosecution admittedly didn't have enough evidence, so it went out and bought some by giving away the farm to a murderer. 7 years is just offensive. That's not a search for truth. That's a deal with the devil." So who was really telling the truth here? Katie and Sigfredo went to trial together, where they both adamantly said that Luis was lying. He was full of shit, and there was absolutely no plot whatsoever. Katie even took the stand, which was an interesting move since the prosecutors apparently had a lot of evidence against her. They had proof that her bank account received a little over $50,000. She had checks from the Adelson Institute, the dental practice, and these checks were signed by Donna, the matriarch of the Adelson family. These checks were then deposited into Katie's bank account when she was not an employee there or did not work for them. There was also a direct phone record trail where she would talk to Charlie, then call Sigfredo, and vice versa, making it blatantly obvious that she was this middleman between the whole thing. Also, in a weird detail, the prosecution also believed that Charlie had paid for her to get a breast augmentation, and that her new Lexus was previously registered to Harvey Adelson, Wendy and Charlie's dad. Everything just very oddly interconnected, and certainly looks like damning evidence, right? So after 7 days of testimony, prosecutors presented this information, as well as what they say were covert discussions over an FBI wiretap. They presented it as evidence that she helped hire her longtime boyfriend Sigfredo to kill Dan in a murder-for-hire plot by Dan's ex-in-laws, the Adelsons. There were also numerous FBI wiretaps where Charlie was implicated in being part of the payments from the dental practice to Katie. Sigfredo was convicted and sentenced to life in prison in 2019. However, Katie's case went a little differently. Her defense said that her money came from her work in nightclubs and also working bottle service in Miami, and also from Sigfredo, who was the father of her 2 children. Additionally, her defense denied that the recordings implicated Katie whatsoever. Instead, they believed it showed that she was coerced into helping her boyfriend at the time, her boyfriend Charlie. Katie's trial ended in a hung jury mistrial, but she was again tried in 2022, where she was ultimately convicted for her role in the murder plot and sentenced to life in prison. However, this time, there was now a 4th arrest that came to light. Wendy's brother Charlie was indicted for murder. And it gets very, very interesting because we are not done with the arrests yet, and we are not done with how tangled this web truly is. In Charlie's trial, multiple text messages and phone calls were played after investigators had wiretapped Charlie's phones.
Hello? Hola, diga. Hello, diga. Hi, who is this? Who's this? Someone's been calling my family and trying to figure out who this is. In reference to what, man? Someone by the name of Sammy called. Yeah, that's me, man. All right, what's going on? Well, what's going on is my brother Tato. Okay, my brother Tato has not been taken care of. His family's not been taken care of. I talked to a dentist. Why are you calling me? Who are you? I gave the number to a lady. I don't know Tato. You don't know Tato? I'm sure you know Katie and Tuto. They've been taken care of since the family problem been taken care of up north. I don't know who you are. You don't? Well, this isn't going away, my friend, because let me tell you something. I was at Broward with Tato, and he told me the whole story. He told me nobody was taking care of him. Nobody was taking care of his family. The family was taking care of Katie and Tuto, and nothing's been taken care of with Tato. So we know what's going on. And Tato needs to be taken care of. Do the right thing. The lady already has the paperwork. She knows what I'm talking about. We know Katie. We know Tuto. We know they've been taken care of.
All right, let me look at
no more f***ing around, man. No more f***ing around. If this ain't going away, you guys need to do the right thing for Tato. That's my brother, man. That's my brother, and he needs to be taken care of. His family needs to be taken care of, just like Katie and Tuto have been taken care of.
I've never met these people, but let me call you back, okay?
That's bullshit, man. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You know this lady. I don't know your relationship with this lady, but we know what the f*** is going on. This ain't going away. Take care of Tato just like you take care of Katie and Tuto, man.
Let me call you back.
Charlie testified in his trial where he tried to explain that the prosecution had all of this entirely wrong. Instead, he said that Katie was aware of the situation that Wendy was going through, and that she knew at one point that the Adelson family had actually offered Dan $1 million in exchange to allow Wendy to move with the boys to South Florida, an offer in which Dan apparently refused, because that just shows what kind of man Dan was. There wasn't a price tag on having limited access to his children. No price would be high enough because all he wanted was to be near his children. He was a good father who loved his kids. So according to Charlie and his defense team, Charlie said that because Katie heard this, she told Sigfredo, the father of her kids, who also happened to have ties to the Latin kings. And according to Charlie, Sigfredo and Katie then came up with a plan to blackmail Charlie, basically saying that they murdered Dan so that they could blackmail Charlie, since it would look like he was a part of it in the first place. Again, this all according to Charlie and his defense team during his trial. Now, this was a pretty crazy defense, I have to say, but in fairness, I guess they had to at least give it a shot since their case was absolutely in the toilet at this point and had already been completely blown apart by the prosecution. But the prosecution wasn't buying any of this, not at all. Some of the evidence presented hadn't been shown before, and some of it wasn't all about Charlie either. It implicated his mother, Donna, the matriarch of the family. And some of the most damning information by far to convict Charlie was intertwined with Donna's actions as well. As part of an FBI sting that was referred to as the bump, an undercover officer ran into Donna while she was walking to pick up the boys from school. He gave her a piece of paper that was an article about Dan Markel's death, and then he basically threatened her, basically saying, "We know what you did, and now you need to help me out and give me some money." Donna was visibly shaken after this, and the FBI wiretapped calls that she made immediately after that directly to Charlie showed that she was obviously worried and says, "No, it probably has to do with both of us."
Excuse me, Mrs. Adelson? How you doing? Just want to give you this. Listen. You're scared. No, don't be scared. Listen, just want to let you know that we know that your family has been taking care of Katie and her friend Tuto for quite some time after your problem up north has been resolved. And I want to let you know that my brother, he's incarcerated. He helped your family with this problem you guys had up north. And we want to make sure that he's going through some rough times. We want to make sure that you take care of what he's going through the way you're taking care of Katie and Tuto. Well, this will explain it. Thank you.
I've got some paperwork hand delivered to me.
You're being sued?
No, that's what I thought it was, but I'm going to need to talk to you.
Does Dad know about this?
The dad's at work today, fortunately.
What's, IRS? Or?
You know, those IRS people, they're kind of obvious sometimes, but, you know, fortunately not now.
Okay.
So I will talk to you. I'll give you a heads up if I'm going to drive up that way.
All right.
Okay? And
does Wendy know that? Is it involved Wendy?
No. So let me just talk to you later, and
What is it? Is there this health okay?
Yeah.
Does it involve me or other people?
Well, probably both of us.
What's that?
Probably the two of us. So you probably have a general idea what I'm talking about. So let's just find some time to talk to each other and take the voice for a ride, okay?
There were multiple instances where it was blatantly obvious that his mother Donna and Charlie were talking in some type of code, but essentially talking about things that made no sense other than a plot to kill Dan, and also how they attempted to cover their tracks in the aftermath. Additionally, a lot of communication between Donna to Wendy and Charlie was introduced during this, where she went absolutely nuts during Wendy's custody battle. She called Dan a fucker, pressured Wendy to threaten Dan to convert the boys to Catholicism, knowing that it would make Dan furious because of how religious he was and how instilled in the Jewish faith he was. And she said over and over how much Dan could not win their custody battle, and almost seemed like she was getting angry with Wendy with how the judge was ruling in the custody case, something that Wendy clearly had absolutely no control over. I mean, the emails are wild and are almost like Donna was staying up all night, fixating on this, and would just send these random, bizarre, and obsessive rants that literally looked like the ramblings of a complete psychopath, in my opinion. And honestly, when I was watching some of this trial, I couldn't even believe that this was real.
However, the rest of your life, and consequently Dad's, mine, and yes, even Charlie's, will be affected by how well you can perform/act before July 31st. You need to be a good actress you can be a good actress when you want to. I've seen you in action. You need to put on the performance of your life. Jibbers hasn't beaten the Adelson family yet. Who's Jibbers?
Jibbers, she's referring to Danny.
Generally speaking, does your mom manipulate the personal lives of her children?
No.
Did your mom call Dan any disparaging names around this time frame?
Well, I just read them in the emails, but I don't remember them independently.
Okay. Did she call him an asshole?
Yes.
A narcissist?
Yes.
A bully?
Yes.
Religious zealot?
Yes.
Bastard?
That I don't remember.
Page 5.
Okay. Is it page 5 from the first email?
Fucker?
Yes.
Were you involved in any way in the plot to kill your ex-husband?
Absolutely not.
Did you know it was going to happen, but maybe not know the details?
I knew nothing.
Is that why you went to the crime scene on the day of the homicide?
I did not go to the crime scene on the day of the homicide.
Do you know who all was involved in the murder?
Well, I learned today, but at the time, no.
Okay. Have you ever privately confronted your brother about his role or possible role in the murder?
My attorney has advised me not to have conversations with anyone in my family about the case.
But you had a close relationship with your brother at the time of the murder, right?
I absolutely had a close relationship with my brother.
And how soon after the murder did your lawyer advise you not to talk to your family about it?
In 2016.
Okay, so what about the 2 years in between? Did you talk to him about it then?
I mean, I talked to him about the fact that a murder occurred, but I guess I don't understand the question.
But you never talked to him about the suspicions you raised in the law enforcement interview that your brother might have done it?
No, I did not.
You suspected your brother could have been a part of this, right?
I suspected lots of people could have been a part of it.
But he was one of the people, right?
While I was talking with law enforcement for 6 hours, terrified out of my mind, I offered them every possible idea I could come up with.
Right. And one of the possible ideas was that your brother could have murdered your child's father.
I didn't really believe that was possible.
Was part of the plot for you to be able to have plausible deniability about this?
Absolutely not.
Is it better for both you and your brother if you don't know the details of this?
I don't even understand the question that you're asking me.
When did you first become aware that you might be a suspect in this case?
I mean, as the ex-wife, I assumed I was a suspect from the beginning.
What was your first thought when you were asked if anyone might have murdered Dan Markel for your benefit?
I thought, oh my God, maybe if I hadn't divorced him, he would still be alive. Maybe this is my fault because I complained to the wrong person. Maybe Danny gave a student a bad grade and they came after him. I just was trying to think of who possibly could have wanted to hurt him.
But you didn't say any of that before. I mean, the first thing you said was Charlie, right?
I don't think so.
Page 25 of your interview, line 5 through 15. Do you have any reason to dispute? Page 25, not 5 hours into it. You say Charlie might have done it, right? Do you want the culpable parties held accountable for murdering the father of your children?
Absolutely. I'm grateful they're already in jail.
But not if it's your family.
It's not my family.
I mean, somebody hired him, right?
Not necessarily.
Somebody paid him.
I learned something this morning.
Yeah, me too. You didn't want him held accountable if it was your family members. Didn't you tell law enforcement that?
That's not what I told law enforcement.
What did you tell law enforcement?
I told them that the person who did this should be held responsible and that I had nothing to do with it.
Page 122, lines 7 through 12. If somebody tried to kill my ex-husband, they should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. The investigator says regardless of who it is, and your answer is, I mean, it would be different if I thought it were my brother.
But I don't think it was my family, is what I said.
Different now, isn't it?
No, it's not different. That's exactly what I
today,
said
isn't
right
it?
here. No, that's not right.
No further questions. If they had any evidence, we'd have already gone to the airport. And I know you already testified about this, but does an innocent person say if they had any evidence?
Right. Katie's saying it's the police, and I'm saying that we're innocent. They're not going to have any evidence to show we were part of something that we were part of. If we had any part of this, we'd be going to the airport right now. And I
Isn't
still say
it
the
true,
same
doctor,
thing.
that they're not going to have any evidence because you were careful?
No, because we weren't a part of this.
You were smart.
No, we weren't a part of this.
You walled yourself off from
I
the
was
killers.
sure they're not going to have evidence to show I did something I didn't do. So we're not running to the airport.
And you're untouchable, right?
No, we didn't do a murder. I wasn't part of a murder. There's no reason to run to the airport.
Have you ever heard the saying that the simplest explanation is always the most likely? Have you heard that?
I've heard that theory before, yeah.
Was your explanation to the jury over the last little over a day the simplest explanation?
It was the truth.
You have a thorough explanation. Would you agree with that?
I told you what happened.
Do you agree that the only problem with having an explanation for everything is that there's just so many explanations?
There's no explanation. I explained what happened.
I want to go through some of that. You claim that you were extorted on July 18th, 2014 by Catherine Magbanua and also in the background some Latin kings, probably Garcia and Rivera, right? Is that accurate?
No, I wasn't extorted by Catherine Magbanua.
You weren't?
That's not what I believed in 2014.
Okay, I'm sorry. I understood you to say you believe that today.
Today I do, yes.
All right, so who extorted you?
I believe that it was Catherine Magbanua's friend that she ran her mouth to.
Did you ever hear Donna Adelson refer to Dan Markel as stupid?
No.
Were you laughing when Wendy was on the stand and I read all the names that Donna referred to Dan Markel as?
No, I laughed when you said the word fucker in court.
Okay. What did she mean when she said Dan Markel was trying to take her sunshines away? Do you know?
My mom never said that.
Oh, so you never heard her say that?
That was made up, and he put it in a court filing, and then now it becomes something that my mom said because someone made it up and put it in a court filing.
And then on 2/19 of 14, Donna texts you again to tread lightly with Wendy and refers to Dan Markel as an asshole and a fucker, right?
Sorry. You made me laugh. Sorry.
That's what I'm here for. Is that what happened? That text?
Did my mom use a foul word to describe him?
Yes, sir. Asshole and fucker, to be specific.
Sorry. she used the curse word correct.
Charlie was ultimately convicted on all charges: murder, conspiracy, and solicitation. After the verdict, Assistant State Attorney Georgia Kappelman said that the investigation into Dan's death is ongoing, and she did not comment any further on whether any other members of the Adelson family could face charges in the future. Well, that came sooner than later, when news broke just a few weeks ago that Donna was arrested. Donna was arrested on a Monday night at an airport while allegedly trying to flee the country. So get this, Donna, who is 73 years old and again the matriarch of her wealthy family, was at Miami International Airport with her husband Harvey, and she was about to board a one-way flight to Vietnam, coincidentally a country that does not have an extradition treaty with the U.S., and that's when she was arrested.
Hi, how are you? You have your ID? No, I don't want to give it to you. Why do I have to give it? My attorney said not to. Why do I have to give it to you? This is evidence. Evidence. She's under arrest. I have to go with. I have to go. I have to go. Let me help you out. I have to stay. Please don't do this. You need to grab the bags. Take the bags. Yeah. You need to wait outside. Okay.
My husband's almost 80 years old. He can't come with me.
Please, can I go? No, you can't join me there. Oh, don't do this, please.
Please.
Oh,
Someone's got to help him get home. This is terrible. You can't do this. This is
Go ahead, grab your hands onto that for me. Is that okay with you? Please. You don't have to have the can for some. She's not going anywhere. Please. Please. Do you have anything in your pocket?
No.
Do you have anything of value in you?
No,
Plus, you have a necklace on you.
Wanna go?
You can take it off. I'll take it.
Yeah, take it off. Okay.
And the earrings.
And the earrings, the rings, take everything. You give it to your husband. Because once you arrive at County Jail, they're gonna make you remove all that.
Can I call my attorney?
You have a passport ready?
Where am I going?
Just hold the company finger.
Where am I going?
You're going to the Dade County Jail.
Dade County Jail.
No,
this is right here, the one on 25.
Wait 1 second,
One
please.
second.
Please. Okay. Do you have any other rings on? I'm sorry. Remove your earrings. So you don't have them.
1 minute.
You take it right through.
Yeah, we'll go back out and just.
You're making a mistake.
Okay, so no mistake.
It's two
do me a
mistakes.
favor and try to take the ring off. Can you get this off for me?
Can you take it off, please, Donna? I don't want to hurt her. Please.
Just a minute.
Please.
It's getting there. That's all. Listen to me.
Yeah. I'll call.
Get in an Uber. Go home.
I will.
Take
I
it
will.
easy.
I will.
All right.
Yes.
Here,
If there's anything else in her person that she wants.
Oh, it's coming, sweetheart. I got it. It's coming. Just
All
a
right.
second.
Do you have her driver's license by any chance? I'm sorry? Her driver's
It's in my
Yeah.
it's in my purse.
Yeah.
Yeah, then you could give it.
Sure. Do you need her
almost there.
passport? Or can I give it to the husband? The passport, can I give it to her?
What's on?
Where is it?
It's in the blue and white. It's in the blue and white.
Yeah, but I'm gonna get her driver's license first. Yeah.
And the license, the address on your license is correct?
Yes.
She needs all her. When she goes to jail, they work
They're all in here though.
Yes, they work. If I take them here, what will happen is when you go there, they toss them out. So when you go to there, you will meet the nurse and the doctor, and then they'll work in conjunction with the hospital to get you whatever you need.
Yeah, but I don't have a list with me. I know what they're doing.
Yes.
I have a.
Is it multiple or is just one or two?
No, there's a bag of medication in here. Is that what you're asking me?
She can take medication.
No, I know. I was just trying to find out if it was like one or two.
Yeah.
If it was one or two, then she may be able to take the name down.
Do you need anything else from her?
Can I ask
So
you
we're good to
something?
go?
Can someone just get my husband outside? And
So I'll get him.
There's a gentleman here with a system and anyway, then
I have the ring. Hold on.
Let me have the ring, please. No, I'll
Okay.
All right, so we don't have the meds, honey, they're on here. Let's please get some water. Wait, you want more? What? I'm gonna want more. No. Thank you. Do you know how long we're going to sit? Oh, how long we're going to sit here?
As soon as he comes back, he's going to take you from here to the launch floor and then to the facility. He's waiting for brother outside to come back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, whatever information he took from you, I guess that's what he was missing, so he's going to enter that and come back.
Okay. So the next place is what? The warrant? What did you say?
Huh?
What did you say the next place was?
Well, see, what happened is the warrant that they have from you is from out of Leon County.
When did they issue a warrant?
So what happened is we have to take you to our warrant room for that information to get entered, and then after that gets entered, before we can take you to the jail, to the local jail.
Okay, because I didn't know there was a warrant. How would I know that?
Well, we wouldn't have been able to take you if there wasn't something in place.
So aren't they supposed to inform? Aren't they supposed to inform me if there was a warrant?
Well, I don't know the details.
I don't either.
They had a warrant. The gentleman that you met earlier in the plainclothes.
Yes.
Right. They were supposed to inform you of whatever, and then because it's a county warrant, that's how we became involved.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So this is pretty egregious and just flat out moronic, in my opinion, if you ask me. But you know we love when criminals are truly this stupid. Because here's the thing. Why on earth would Donna think that she could talk to Charlie, her son, on a recorded jail call and tell him that she is getting her affairs in order, thinking of or possibly going to a non-extradition country? This after Charlie just went through a trial where Donna was implicated in many ways. And remember, Charlie was convicted on how strong the evidence was. So then she just thinks that she isn't being monitored in general, or ignores the fact of these jail calls being recorded and monitored, despite the fact that in the beginning of these jail calls, it says verbatim that all conversations are recorded and reviewed by jail staff. It is just beyond me. Like, could you get any more stupid? Thank you again for being so stupid. We love when criminals cannot think straight and think that they're above the law and that they're being sneaky. She thought, oh, I'm being sneaky. I'm going to Vietnam, this one-way ticket. They don't have the extradition treaty. I know they're probably investigating into me, but they won't be able to bring me back and charge me. But you make these plans on a recorded call with your son, who was just convicted and in jail now, knowing these calls are going to be reviewed by staff. Make it make sense. So Donna has been charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and solicitation to commit murder. And as a little fun fact, after she was arrested, she was first taken to the same facility that Courtney Clenny is being held in. And Courtney Clenny is the OnlyFans model who allegedly murdered her boyfriend. However, Donna's now been transferred to Leon County Jail in Tallahassee. She's being held without bail too, given her obvious flight risk status. So now, there have been a couple of updates in the Adelson case as a whole over the past few months, and to start, Donna's trial date has been set to start on September 17th. Initially, it was supposed to begin on the 30th, but her team asked for it to be moved up because of 2 Jewish holidays that take place in October. So, moving on to updates in her good old son, Charlie. Back in December, Charlie was sentenced to life in prison, but things have definitely not gone as planned. Let me break that down for you. See, apparently Charlie Adelson was moved a few times for his own protection while he was in jail. But now the Florida Department shows Charlie is being incarcerated in South Dakota. This is because apparently the Latin Kings, that gang, allegedly green-lit a hit on him. So remember, this is the gang that he tried to say was responsible for Dan's murder, that they were trying to blackmail him. Well, now they're pissed, obviously, and so they greenlit a hit on him. Or maybe there was truth and they're pissed that he was narking and ratting, who really knows. But anyways, they moved him to South Dakota. And take a listen to this clip from Court TV because I literally could not believe my ears when I first heard the details about this, or what was said about Wendy moving to Austin as well. Take a listen.
You know, he had a really risky defense with Daniel Rashbaum. He essentially said, for those who are not familiar with the case, that he was extorted by the infamous Latin Kings gang, and there's a honor code among the gang, and the consensus is that never happened. So they basically, their defense was to throw this notorious gang under the bus, and there are ramifications for that. And once Charlie was convicted and went to state prison, according to my sources and all the reporting out there, he was green-lighted, which in prison parlance means they put a hit out on him, that he would be killed inside the prison. And this became an untenuous situation. He had been moved 3 different times within the state of Florida, and he was just convicted, by the way, this past November. So it's a lot of movement. And ultimately they said, hey, we've got to get this guy out of here for his own safety. And they sent him far away to South Dakota, and that's where he's sitting in a state prison right now.
Joel, we knew you would know. When are we going to see Wendy arrested, or aren't we? Your thoughts on that, please, Joel.
So I've asked just about everyone who's closely connected to this, and the overwhelming consensus is everyone thinks she's in on it. In fact, almost everybody thinks she helped manipulate this entire situation, but she was also is a lawyer and was also incredibly smart in kind of covering her tracks. And it is believed that she would be the hardest to prosecute. Nevertheless, Georgia Kappelman, who's the lead prosecutor in this case, has a distinct animus for Wendy Adelson. She is not a fan of Wendy Adelson. And, you know, whether you like somebody or not should never play into a prosecution necessarily, but we all know that there's kind of a competitive edge and competitive factor. And, you know, the belief is split 50-50 really about whether she will be prosecuted. But from a, you know, sort of a revenge standpoint, in order to pay for this crime, people want to see her tried for this case. And in my gut, I feel like she will be the next domino to maybe not fall, but definitely be attacked by the prosecution. It's just going to be a matter of time. They've been very systematic here in going after, you know, the hitmen first, the middle woman in this case, and then ultimately Charlie Adelson, and next, of course, Don in the fall. But I think we do see Wendy Adelson prosecuted here. And we're getting word that Wendy is headed to Texas, that she's out of here. She's going to Austin. Apparently she has some family down in Austin, Texas, but people who are slightly more cynical think that she is starting to prepare to maybe slip through the southern border. We know that Donna, right after Charlie's conviction, was caught trying to board a plane to Dubai to ultimately get to Vietnam, and that's where she was arrested.
It's interesting. This family just gets more and more complex as time goes on. It's truly my opinion that it's only a matter of time before Wendy gets arrested, but I'm interested to know what you guys think. So this case is just a complete disaster. Not a disaster because obviously Donna's going to be standing trial. Charlie's already been convicted. I definitely think that Wendy is going to be arrested. I could be wrong, but I think she will be. I think that there is just like so much interconnection. This family's like weaving all their trickery. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think Wendy was involved? Did she know what was going down? Did she condone it? Will she be arrested? What's going to happen to good old Donna? What do you guys think about this case? It is one that is pretty wild. It kind of feels like a bootleg version of The Sopranos, right? Did you ever watch The Sopranos? I didn't watch it until this year, and then I binged the whole thing in literally a few weeks. But it feels like this family thinks that they're like high tough, can get away with things, that they run the show, they call the shots, but it's like a bootleg version because it's like, you're not that tough. You're not in the mob. You're not in the mafia. You're not Tony Soprano, Donna. You are not Tony Soprano. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in with me on today's case update, and I will be back on the mic with you with more updates very soon. We're going to get back to this. So we're going to back to this method where I'm just going with it and we're going through it together quickly on the mic. So if you want to make sure you don't miss any of those episodes and you want to check this channel out more, make sure to subscribe. It's totally free, but hit that little button, pause, do it. Do it. Did you do it? I'm feeling a certain kind of way right now. Hit subscribe, and I will talk with you guys again very soon. All right, until the next one, stay safe. Bye.